Okay, here we are, folks. This is the movie that was gonna come out right before our pandemic hit. Since then, we have waited another year and 2 months for this. Plus, the teaser poster for it has been hanging on that wall forever. So, was this movie worth the wait? So A Quiet Place Part 2 is a sequel to A Quiet Place, of course. You remember that horror thriller movie that came out in 2018 that surprised a lot of people by giving us a completely unique premise and a simple story that was executed in a really good way. I'll let you know right now, I have not watched that movie again since I saw it in theaters. But I do still remember a lot from it because it's a very memorable movie. So I had enough to go on from my memory going into this sequel. Now, of course, I'm not going to spoil this movie, Part 2, in this video, but I will talk about what happened in the first one. So in the first Quiet Place, John Krasinski's character Lee died. He sacrificed himself so his family could get away from these blind aliens that are drawn to sound. You remember, if you make a sound in this world, these aliens will hear you, they will find you, and they will kill you. They'll shred you apart. But at the end of the first Quiet Place movie, this family, the Abbott family, they have found a weakness in these aliens. That really high-pitched sound, if they play that sound towards these aliens, they'll like paralyze in pain, and that gives you enough time to shoot them in the face and kill them. So now that we have found a weakness in these aliens, enter Part 2, the remaining members of the Abbott family, that is Evelyn, played by Emily Blunt, Reagan, played by Millicent Simmons, Marcus, played by Noah Jupe, and the newborn baby, they now leave their home to look for help, and now we have our continuation of A Quiet Place. Yeah, I'm gonna keep the main plot of this movie vague because the trailers didn't tell you what the main plot of this movie is, so out of respect to that, I'm not gonna tell you the main plot of this movie. But holy shit. This movie is awesome. It's funny, when I saw this movie yesterday, I was in a really bored mood for most of the day. And like walking into the theater, watching the trailers, I was like, alright, trailers, alright, can we get to the movie? And then once the movie started and it kept going, I was like, whoa, okay, I'm suddenly very engaged. This is like the most exciting thing to happen to me all day. I don't know what that says about me, but anyway. The standout in this movie, I'm sure you've heard it already, but Millicent Simmons as Reagan. Holy God. This kid, this girl, has a bright future ahead of her in acting and filmmaking and producing and whatever she wants to do in her life, she's got it made. And I know, for those of you who are thinking, that's like a random thing. Really? Millicent Simmons? Like, what about Emily Blunt or Killian Murphy? Aren't you gonna talk about them first? Yeah, I know, you would think, right? But no, Millicent Simmons, she is awesome. She's the deaf kid you remember from the first one. She's actually deaf in real life. And so when you have a deaf kid in a world where you can't make a sound, otherwise these aliens will hear you and come and kill you, if you can't even hear the sounds you might be making, that just triples the odds of you dying. And so that makes for some really intense shit in this movie. Millicent Simmons' character Reagan is given her own story arc in this movie, again keeping it vague, but I was like, okay, is she gonna be able to carry that? And she does. She absolutely does. She sells the fear, but she also sells the bravery. You're like, this is the bravest kid in the world. Yeah, the Sorting Hat would place her into Gryffindor before even being completely placed on her head. She's a badass. Because again, she doesn't talk a whole lot, so a lot of the acting is in her facial expressions. So it kind of reminds you of Daphne Keane in Logan or Millie Bobby Brown in Stranger Things. Yeah, it's that kind of great acting. Killian Murphy is also really good in this movie. He's a new character named Emmett. The Abbott family runs into him. He has this like hideaway place, and his involvement in the story of the Abbott family in this world, I felt really worked. Killian Murphy is funny because I think the only movie I've seen where he has the lead main character role is 28 Days Later. Other than that, I've only ever seen him as a supporting character, including this movie. I think he needs more lead roles because he's a really good actor. And of course, Emily Blunt is also really good. I know, it's weird that I'm talking about her third when she's like first and foremost on the poster, but what can I say? I feel like in terms of importance, she is third in line in this movie. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, she was great. She still sells all the emotions. She's sad, she's mourning her dead husband, because this movie picks up pretty much right where the first one left off. So all the events of the first movie are still fresh in these characters' minds, and that really shows in Emily Blunt's character, Evelyn. But also, I don't want to sell the son short. Noah Jupe, Marcus, this is the best picture I could find. I'll say of the main characters in this movie, aside from the baby, it feels like he has the least amount of screen time, but his scenes were also great. Just all around, each character had their great moments. There was never a dull moment in this movie. This movie was intense as fuck, just like the first one. I'll say, these Quiet Place movies are probably the best PG-13 horror movies I've ever seen, which isn't saying much, but I'm sure that goes for a lot of people. But in this one, it's not just because you had to stay silent in this world, but it's because these main characters don't do the best job of that. Granted, it's by accident that a loud noise would be made or something, for example. And so when a loud noise is made, you're just like, fuck, run, the aliens are gonna hear you. I was sitting there in my theater seat like this. I was sitting here like this for a good chunk of the movie. Because you just care about these characters so much because they sell the emotion. If these actors were not good in these movies would fail entirely. And yeah, there are some scenes in this movie that did make me squirm and feel uncomfortable like the first one did, but I don't think it was as bad for me as it was in the first one. That or I've grown more accustomed to movies like this over the past couple years. I don't know which one it is, but there you go. There are a few jump scares in this movie, admittedly, and some of them did irritate me, because they did that thing where like a noise came out of nowhere, but you should have heard that thing coming, and it really did nothing for the movie at all. Like, example, you remember in the 2019 Pet Sematary movie, there was that jump scare where the truck just came out of nowhere, and like it passed on the street, and that's where the noise came in? I was like, we should have heard that truck coming from down the road, right? You would hear the steady noise of the truck getting closer, and so when it passed, it wouldn't be a jump scare. So the logic of that jump scare didn't make sense to me anyway. In this movie, there is one kind of like that involving birds. Like a flock of birds just came out of nowhere. I was like, we should have heard those birds coming. But I don't know, it was like a jump scare for the sake of there being a jump scare in this movie. And it did nothing for the plot at all, really. So if I have any gripes about this movie, that would be it. These unnecessary jump scares. Because there were a few of them. I also love the amount of detail in this movie that springboards off the first one. Like I said, I hadn't seen the first one since the theaters, but I remember enough because it was very memorable. So when I see things like Emily Blunt's foot is all bandaged because of the nail from the first movie, because I remember that nail from the first movie because that was a thing that got under my skin. So the fact that Emily Blunt's foot is bandaged makes you go like, oh yeah, this takes place right after the first one because her foot was just stabbed by a nail. So now it has a bandage. You get it. Just the sequel did not have to do that. It could have taken place maybe a couple days or weeks or whatever after the first one. But no, this is truly part 2 of the A Quiet Place story. I don't know how many parts there are gonna be in total, but I imagine that part 3 is gonna take place right after this one. And so these are gonna be chapters in this big Quiet Place story. And I'm totally down for that. I will say, this is gonna sound kind of funny, but I didn't like the place where this movie decided to call credits. Yeah, the scene where it decided to cut to black and go to credits, I was like, no, I actually said out loud, I was like, no! I didn't like that choice. I wish it could have gone on for a few more minutes. And yeah, I know that some people said that about the first movie as well. I actually didn't mind it in the first one, if I'm being honest. Where the first one ended, I was like, okay, cool, bring on part 2. I was satisfied with it. In this one, I was like, God damn it, no, don't leave it there! Again, gonna keep it vague because I am not spoiling this, but it did just leave me wanting. As for the score in this movie, it was once again done by Marco Beltrami, and yes, his piano dissonance is back, that out-of-tune feeling. Again, it works very well with the movie. I felt like the score was a little louder in this one. There are a lot more dramatic, swelling orchestral themes. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I just forgot from the first one. But it was good, it really worked. So, A Quiet Place Part 2, I might be in the minority here, I don't know, but I liked it more than the first one. It was super intense. The story of this world is expanded on more without making it super complex, which I feel is really important to A Quiet Place. The acting is fantastic. Millicent Simmons really does stand out. I can't wait to see her in more movies. Just as I was walking out of the movie theater, I was like, all right, let's bring on part 3. Let's make this a trilogy. Let's do it. And it's happening. For A Quiet Place Part 2, I will say, go see this movie right now. I actually think it was a good call for me to have not seen the first one since theaters, because it actually made this movie feel like a newer experience in my mind than it probably should have been. So now I don't think I'm gonna watch this movie again until like part 3 comes out on Blu-ray. So then I can just watch the Quiet Place trilogy as a fresh experience. And I think that would be a pretty fun night. So A Quiet Place Part 2. Have you seen it yet? What do you think about it? Do you think it's as good as the first one? And when do you think we'll be getting part 3? Whatever you think, go ahead and leave a comment. And don't forget to subscribe.